and welcome to another Conversations in Innovation. I'm Jamal Jones, Program Manager with the CIE. Wanted to make a brief announcement that this session is being recorded. Also, just like to remind everyone that our annual Launch You Student Shark Tank Startup Competition is still taking applications. The competition is for high school students as well as college undergraduate students. Students outside of Harrisburg University are welcome to apply. Applications are due by March the 1st. If there are any questions, please email us at cie@harrisburgu.edu and visit our website at cie.harrisburgu.edu/launchu.
I also want to give a shout out to the Launch You competition because it's one of our flagship competitions that has been running for the last couple of years. And so please check our website if you are a high school or undergrad student. So as far as CI is concerned, CI's mission is to empower innovators to build successful ventures. And we make a special effort in empowering more women and underrepresented minorities to be successful entrepreneurs. So I want a special mention to thank all of our donors, corporate and individual, for their generosity, without which we would not have been able to grow and create this tremendous impact that we are having in this region. So please look them up on our website. And if you are interested in supporting our mission, please reach out to us. So with that said, welcome to a new edition of Conversations in Innovation. The goal of these conversations is to bring leaders from various industries and technology to share their experience and insights. And we have been gaining audience steadily since we first started this more than a year back. So welcome to our first-time listeners, and thank you to our repeat listeners. And a special shout out to our listeners from Asia and South America for staying late or getting up early, depending on whatever time you are in. And so it's my privilege to welcome today's panelists to talk about emerging technology and its impact on industries and workforce development. So all of us, especially with the uncertainty of the pandemic, have been forced to go into discovering new technologies or be on virtual calls. And now we hear about metaverse, we hear about cryptocurrency, NFT, and technology is coming at us at such a fast pace that a lot of the leaders are struggling to understand this, how it impacts our life, how does it impact your industries. Your current role, but also your journey so far. What did it look like? What are some of the challenges? So let me start with you, Sanjay, since you are the first one on my window, or at least the way it's lined up.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about your current role. We'll get into the company a little bit later, but I want to, it's more of the personal role and, what was your journey like? What's your background? A little bit about that.
Absolutely. So I'm currently the co-founder and CEO of Cognistics. So good afternoon, everybody in the West, in the Eastern time zone. I just wanted to say hi first to everyone. I've been doing Cognistics for the past 7 years. So my journey started with an undergrad degree in computer science in India at the National Institute of Technology, one of the RECs. It used to be a regional engineering college, and they've upgraded it since then. Then I got a master's in computer science at Virginia Tech, and I also have an MBA from Carnegie Mellon. So after graduating, I worked as a software engineer. I did that for a long time, worked on object-oriented databases, C++. My first job was actually an AI company, Carnegie Group, which was a Carnegie Mellon spin-off. And the company went public. We all made a little bit of money. I was super excited. It was the whole journey, but seeing it from a software engineer's angle. And then after graduating from Carnegie Mellon, I actually wrote a business plan, and I had a check of about $4 million from our VC fund to get a company started. We ended up raising $18 million. That was a big learning experience for me. We were able to sell the company. Then we had another company called Intellions, where we sold the IP and technology to Google. So that's a little bit of my background. I've also worked at IBM for a long time, working with Watson. So that's one thing how that happens when you're old. So I've been doing this now 30 years. So you have a lot of experience. So that's a little bit of my background. So back to you, Jay.
Well, thanks, Sanjay. I have quite a few follow-up questions. So before that, I wanted to ask Chris about his journey, which your company. I think once we get into the company, I'm sure we'll talk about this. But for most people who have kids, Roblox is probably how the connection to your company would be. For most people. So, Chris, tell us a little bit about your background and your current role. And
Absolutely. And thanks again for having me. I'm excited to be here. So I am a senior manager at Elastic in the community development team, and I've actually been tasked with building a new business, which is focused on taking Elastic resources and committing those to early stage startups to help them or help in the initial nurture phase of their development and get them to a point of long-term sustainability, kind of an investment of our future customer pipeline. I've actually had a long road to this position as well. I actually started in corporate finance, mainly just because I graduated school in 2009. In American history, considered the worst time to have graduated from college, just based on opportunities that were available. And so I just took advantage of the first opportunity that really came about, and was an opportunity to work in a traditional industry, but in an innovative way. The company I was working for was in the mortgage industry, but was doing so strictly over an online platform and an online interface, which was revolutionary for the time. No other company really existed in that capacity. And so was at the forefront of understanding how innovation was disrupting traditional business. And so through that time, I moved all around the country and eventually landed in San Francisco, where the company was headquartered. And while I was there, recognized that there was a ton of opportunity in the technology space, understanding, being at the hub of innovation, what kinds of opportunities potentially existed. And so to more familiarize myself with that, I actually left the bank and went to work for a venture capital firm. Started in really a utility role, just as an opportunity to learn about the business, and then found a niche in business development where I created a new avenue where we were actually identifying corporate partnerships that we could align the innovation from the startups in our portfolio to meet the innovation objectives of large corporations. And so we wanted to really create this holistic coming together of these two worlds, and built a great business model around that, and ended up transitioning to work for SoftLayer that had just been acquired by IBM to launch IBM Cloud, so that I could then take my experience in working with VCs and corporates into understanding how we could position ourselves with VCs around the world and understanding their investment strategies and how they aligned with our innovation objectives at IBM. And so I joined Elastic about 2 years ago to build a very similar business, and that's what I'm doing today.
there you go. So Sanjay, before we get into the company itself, one follow-up question I had is, I mean, you had an engineering degree, then a master's, then an MBA. So it's very much, and I kind of get that. Coming from India, there's this whole focus on education as like that's the only thing. It's almost like a survival question, right? I mean, I remember I wrote an article for the Times in India that talked about when I was growing up. If you don't get into an engineering school or medicine school, it's like the whole world has fallen apart, kind of. The family goes into like this depression and all of that. So coming from so you had a very solid educational background. So what would you say were even with that, would you say was one of the challenges you faced from a career perspective, or what was like a pivot point or something that you say that you really, okay, this is my career path or your journey, if you look back?
I was always, very fascinated by computers. And in fact, growing up in India, as you know, and I grew up in the 70s and 80s. So there was hardly any access to computers. So when I got my hands on the first one in grade school, sixth, seventh grade, and we used to, me and my brother used to program, games together, car racing, that was a thing. Basic was the simple computers. So that always fascinated me. And I continued that, to an engineering college in India, mine was the second batch of computer science. So everybody said, hey, and in India, sort of back in those days, you either went for electronics engineering if you got really good grades. Computer science was a new field, and then you got mechanical and electrical and all that stuff. So I ended up choosing computer science because of my passion and my interest, and sort of obviously continued that into when I got my master's at Virginia Tech again in computer science. The MBA was a different thing. I was happily programming and doing object-oriented databases and C++ coding, moving to Java. And one of my friends one day says, hey, I said, let's go out to grab a beer. He says, I can't. I have a GMAT tomorrow. So I'm appearing for GMAT and giving my MBA. So I thought, hey, that sounds good. Let me do that with you. And sort of I ended up at Carnegie Mellon as a result because it was a local college in Pittsburgh. But I would say each degree played a pivotal role. I always have a very strong technical foundation. So when computer scientists or engineers or data scientists and come to me and come up with an estimate or a way of solving the problem, I can engage very effectively with them. I can engage very effectively with the technical team of the clients. That makes a big difference. So from a career path, even though sort of you want to lead companies, you want to start companies, either you yourself or one of the leaders has to have that strong technical background. And then the business side, because I was such a techie and a nerd, I didn't have the exposure. I didn't know what finance was all about, what accounting was all about, or marketing. And those things came from the business school, and I could sort of relate to them very well. In fact, I will say one thing, I always thought, why do I have to do macroeconomics or microeconomics or acting? But those classes teach you a lot, your ability to present and speak. So I think goes well. And then recently I was actually uh, asked to be on the board of the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland. So all my macroeconomics training helps me a lot in looking at inflation. So it all comes around. I think you can never sort of, anything that you learn and spend from an education perspective will pay huge dividends. And I'm a big proponent of that, and gives you a much wider exposure and gives you confidence because you know what you're talking about and you have the background to be able to do so. I know that was a long answer, but yeah.
That was really helpful. So, Chris, almost the same question. And I'm a big admirer of Steve Jobs. Always was, has been. And I read all of his biographies, saw the movies, and so there's always that piece where he was trying to figure out what he wanted to do, and then the calligraphy class that he took, which kind of was this whole. So when I was listening to you about the history and major, and then trying to discover. So what was your pivot, or where did you figure out this whole connection between the investment piece and looking at new opportunities, if there was one?
No, I mean it was much later than school. I mean that's for sure. I mean my college education was very straightforward. I took a full scholarship to run track at a university because I was responsible for paying for my own education, and so I made a business decision to to attend a school that I didn't necessarily want to go to, and got a degree plan that was just going to get me out as quickly as possible to start figuring out my way in the world. And so, which I'm very grateful for. It was a great opportunity. Not the best school. I actually looked at the university rankings. It's ranked 827th in the United States. And so by no means do I have a prestigious education background. But when I did start working, and like I said, as I was in the finance space and understood the world was really going through, especially the United States was going through this pivotal time where the market had crashed based on the subprime lending crisis. And so I was in an industry that was dramatically affected by that, but saw how instituting innovation practices within that industry could revolutionize it. and was really when most institutions were being shut down left and right. Over a 4-year period, we grew our asset size from 36 million to 2.5 billion. And so understanding the opportunity that existed by looking at a traditional business through a new lens, kind of changed the way that I approached my career. And so while understanding that I was on a safe career trajectory within finance, knew that if I truly wanted to be in a disruptive industry, that I needed to transition into new tech and evolving tech. And the best way for me to learn that was understanding where I've always said, follow the money. And the best place to follow the money is by going to work for a firm who is investing in these new innovative areas. And so that was my general mindset. Put myself in a position to where I had no experience in the industry, but was just very willing to learn. I was willing to take a role that really didn't have a description. It wasn't like, hey, we want to hire you to do this. It was, hey, if you hire me, I'll do whatever you ask. I took a dramatic pay cut to do it as well. And so there was sacrifice that was involved, but it provided me and afforded me the opportunity to learn so much. And so that was, that was a big pivotal point for me.
Thanks. So I'm sure, we'll have a few questions around, because like you said, the school ranking and all that, doesn't really matter in a later stage. And, as you figure out your journey. And so this will be, there'll be questions from our student population about how do you get a job so Sanjay, coming back to a little bit about your company and who do they serve? What is the kind of customers they have? Just tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So we started out as a bespoke applied AI company where we were solving problems, large AI data analytics problems for manufacturing companies, of course, located in Pittsburgh. We were working with PPG. We did smart bots, which could, with facial recognition for companies like Nestle. And then we got more into logistics and supply chain. So we were working with a lot of companies that had a lot of transactional data, finding anomalies in data, fixing those data issues. And then sort of we started working from an NLP perspective, natural language processing, with the Society of Automotive Engineers, where we looked at all the aerospace standards, were able to parse all the information to see if a part or a material changed, what all standards get impacted. But over time, Jay, what we have done is we've transitioned from the bespoke or custom AI solutions to a product-oriented strategy. So now we have products that are reusable, which what it does is it gives us a solid case and ROI analysis before we walk into a customer. And they can sort of take the product or take some of these reusable AI components and apply them. That's become a sort of a growth engine from our perspective to make that happen. So that switch happened. It was a successful switch, and that's really accelerating the growth of the company and where we are.
Just for the non-technical folks out there listening in. So, when you talk about artificial intelligence product, right? Is that like a software play, or is there a hardware play involved in this? Or how does your what does your customer get from you, and what do they do? If you could give a quick example.
Yep, our services are mostly software based. I'd say 99.9%. So what we do is you send us a lot of data. We are able to analyze the data, tell you if the data is clean, normalized, if it needs to be massaged, if it's sufficient. Then we fit the best models, AI, ML models on that data to make the best predictions to meet your analytical objectives. Yeah, how many of my customers will shipping demands will increase significantly? Where do the issues I see? Which customers are going to have inefficient fills or zero fills if I'm a logistics company? So we can then build the models to fit your data and make predictions from your data. So our answer mostly is software that we deliver. We do a little bit of work in computer vision as well. So where we are able to sort of detect both facial recognition, how many customers are walking in, how many items are they picking up, loss prevention cases. But that's our focus. We are not a robotics play. We're not sort of self-driving vehicle play. So there are AI companies that do that. Ours is software as a service.
Helpful because like AI is such a big space, and I'll come back to that in the next question. But it's getting a little more deeper into the technology wise. So Chris, coming to you regarding the company, tell us a little bit about the company and who are the customers you serve. Like I said, Roblox is one of the how I came to know about you guys. So tell us a little bit of.
Happy to. So at our core, Elastic is a search company. And so understanding that data is growing exponentially every day. It's understanding how do you actually pull data sets together from different sources, and how do you understand that data? Being able to find specific information within it that's useful to you, that's useful to your customers. And so at our core, that's what we are. We've built additional products on top of that. But if you think about I don't know that I can disclose what clients I can disclose. I didn't actually look at a list of those that I can talk about and use cases that I can share. But for the most part, so many of the tools that you use on your iPhone every day that have a search component are search integration. And so a lot of the familiarity you have in the tools that you use on a regular basis, certainly use Elasticsearch.
Because I know this is an open source platform, right? So there's a question that when I did a software company, and Red Hat was kind of like an open source, a company that supports open source. So just for our larger audience, can you give a little bit color on, because when people think open source, they think it's free out there. So why do you need a company, right? So what does the company do?
Yeah, so we are no longer technically considered open source. So we recently changed the licensing that no longer allows us to use the open source terminology, but what we consider ourselves is free and open. And so like our core component, or our core technology, is the ELK stack, Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. And so those tools collectively are free and open for the usage of anyone who wants to integrate into a broader platform. Our services that we have built on top of that core technology that we offer to clients are what we ultimately monetize. And so, we have our enterprise search product, we have our security products, observability. And so when you think about the hierarchy of how our technology is built, you have the ELK stack that, I guess, the technically doesn't sit on the bottom anymore, because now we launched Elastic Cloud. Not that we're a competitor to a lot of the major cloud players. We're actually a third-party collaborator and a third-party provider of those cloud services. And so when you get on board onto Elastic Cloud, you actually select which of the major cloud providers that you are comfortable hosting on in the process of setting up that account. And so the Elastic Stack then sits on top of that, and then the core products on top of the ELK stack.
Cool. So that follows up, Sanjay, with the question on the technology, right? Like because we ended up last piece that you were talking about was artificial intelligence, and in one of my previous, it was a couple of, I think about few months back, there was a panel, and I read a quote from Elon Musk that said artificial intelligence is like this roller coaster that's coming, and humans are like these molehills, and whether you want it or not, they roll over you. And then one of the panelists, who was a really big research in the AI, he said his immediate reaction is, I hate Elon Musk and I hate that quote, and it doesn't make any sense or something. So people have this whole, AI is going to take over, so from a technology perspective, you look at it from the company perspective, but you also look at where AI is going. So, and you mentioned about robots and all of that. So tell me a little bit about the technology, where it's going. How do you see the AI playing into your company's innovation, but also the larger perspective?
AI has come a long way. Early 90s, it used to be, expert systems, rule-based systems. You say if then else statements, and that's kind of, what you programmed in case statements, sort of the computer scientists out there. Over time, and sort of, it has matured quite a bit. So if you plant sort of a bamboo tree, it takes a long time, 5 years, and then it shoots up 90 feet in 6 weeks. I think we're in that hyper growth phase from an AI perspective. And the reason for that is the following. Few things have happened. Cloud computing has increased significantly. So you can get CPUs, GPUs. Computer vision has become fascinating, sort of facial recognition, being able to detect objects, being able to, for cars to drive themselves, word error rate, so speech. Computers can sort of now understand what you and I are talking about better than humans can. So Chris probably will miss a word or two. I'm only picking on Chris there a little bit. But the Siri or Google or Alexa, they have become so good in understanding what we are saying. Now, if you put all these things together, sort of being able to analyze a lot of data, bringing this multimodal data together, there's a lot of cool AI applications that can happen. You can segment clients together. You can understand what's happening from that perspective. You can predict things. You can much better from that perspective. So one example, in fact, where we use Elastic as a company is where they're looking at all the regulations for online gaming. So for FanDuel and DraftKings, now that Super Bowl is just behind us, they go ahead and they crawl all these websites. And what we are helping them do is for any of these online gaming companies, as regulation changes, we can search, find, massage all the information using Elastic, sort of, as one of the components there, and say, hey, FanDuel, here is how the regulation is changing for a new state, or if your new state is coming on board. So all these things are possible because technology is changing. And so I don't know, it's a little long answer, but where AI is going, I think the automation will happen. So if I go back in time, we could all plow fields manually. Of course, tractors came, robots came to pick up things from the warehouses. I think all these things will happen where what humans need to do and think about is sort of doing higher order tasks. So that's where I'd say, if we keep on improving and we keep on innovating, so let AI do the mundane task, I think we'll be much better as a world. And I think it's the right direction to move forward for an organization or for society.
Following up on that and that same, because you talked about the stack and all of that in the Elasticsearch, right? So from a technology perspective, because there is this whole thing that if the data is not good, you're searching, you still get bad information, right? So do you guys look into that space? And from a technology perspective, how do you help, clean data or things like that? Or are you just purely a search? And where do you see some of the new technology components that's coming into that?
I'm not an expert on the subject, and so I don't want to speak over my head. But I do know that we have different logging mechanisms in terms of importing data that I think are pretty standardized in terms of the quality of data that is actually being evaluated and searched through. And so obviously it's a critical component. You're right. I mean, the search of data is only as good as the data that you're evaluating. And so certainly an important element, but not something that I can speak in depth to.
One of the questions that, because we assume that we are almost over with the pandemic, but we still are in the pandemic, right? So that's a follow-up question, Chris, for you, and then I'll come to Sanjay about the same thing. So how has pandemic, you said you've been with Elastic 2 years or so you probably stepped in right in the pandemic, right? So how did that, how was that experience? And are you guys working all remote now? Are you getting back in person soon? What are you seeing from your company's perspective and the industry in what the pandemic is part about?
Yeah, I think it's been a really interesting roller coaster. I mean, we had to adjust a lot of our practices, our normal business practices, based on the pandemic. So much of what my involvement in the ecosystem is around travel, meeting with different startups, meeting with different investors, understanding a lot of the solutions that are being created in a very real way that I have been unable to do. I mean, our Elastic has, in order to protect the broader employee base, put strong limitations on travel, which I think was warranted for the time. I mean, especially when the rest of the world also wasn't traveling. But we have, even going into the pandemic, Elastic was majority distributed company, meaning that most of the company worked remotely regardless. And so there wasn't a major transition. That we were better positioned when the pandemic hit to continue business as usual. In large part, there are certain sectors of the company, certain sales organizations that do require client travel that had to take a back seat. And so there were adjustments that had to be made. But we are now pivoting into this new post-pandemic world where we have where the rest of the market and a lot of other companies in our sector adjusted during the pandemic to where we have the ability to be more remote, to operate in this new normal. And so where do we combine what we've taken from the pandemic and with the old ways of doing business to create this ultimate efficient new avenue of maximizing our business opportunities? And so, I think that the pandemic, if we can take something, good from the bad, that we did learn to be more efficient, that we did learn how to probably cut unnecessary costs in a lot of important ways. And, based on the Fed's response to the cost concerns, that money was essentially free, and we saw a major injection of capital into the overarching market. And so you're seeing tremendous growth opportunities that didn't necessarily exist before, where companies are willing to take bets and explore new avenues of business that they weren't necessarily willing to before. And so we're starting to see a lot of those things come to fruition, which has been exciting to see. I think that now we have the responsibility of utilizing that capital in a very responsible way, because it's very easy to spend money on new and exciting ideas, but if you can't actually drive those to create tangible value and drive business results, then it's all for naught. And so, like I said, we're in this really interesting inflection point where we take what we learned and how we've created this this mix of the old and the new, with, again, the capital injection, and how do we actually move forward responsibly. So.
When you go through something like a pandemic, because I posted some time back on LinkedIn from my class about this paradox of, leaders are supposed to have clear answers, but when you go through something like this, where nobody really has an answer, but everybody looks up to you. And so for a company, and I think when we last time talked, you were talking about that, individuals wanting to live in different places and all of that. How did you manage to the pandemic and the panic with dealing with your employees, your vendors, your suppliers? There's a whole lot of different pieces of an organization that you ultimately are responsible for. So
no, I think that's a great quote. Obviously, COVID had a huge impact, right? Sort of, we saw supply chain disruptions. Companies initially panicked and they wanted to cut down their spending. So we reassured them, sort of saying that, hey, we'll continue to work with you. We'll do what we need to do to make it successful. But we also took that as an opportunity. So first thing what we did was, for logistics and supply chain companies, we actually came up with a product called change management. So as the pandemic is rolling out, what has it done to your customer demand? Obviously, it fell a lot significantly. So the change management picked it up. Which customers are coming back? Which customers are not coming back? So we were able to work hand in hand with them and provide value to them to sort of navigate this path, which I think was great from their perspective and our perspective, and it made the partnership even stronger, right? The second thing, sort of, which was, we were very flexible, and from an employee perspective, if people were not comfortable Nobody needed to go to work for the longest time. Even now, they don't. Sort of, nobody needs to come to the office and nobody wants to come to the office. We, in fact, had employees who were partner employees who were coming from India. We made sure they got back to their home countries in a timely manner. So I think the biggest shift that I have seen, which all companies out there need to look at seriously, is give the employees the flexibility. Sort of, people have now since moved back to Ukraine, which I don't know if I'll talk about that choice anymore. Lima, Peru, one person went, one person moved to San Diego, a couple of people went to New Mexico, Seattle. People are moving where they want to move. They're working from that. And we are all sort of, you empower them, saying it's okay, we trust you completely. They actually deliver more for you as a result of that than less. Every once in a while, sort of, we give the option. It's not, you don't have to come, but we'll come back to the offices in Pittsburgh, have a team dinner, have a team event together. So last year, between the waves, we were able to plan, and I know Jay will understand this, but most people know now, no, we actually had a Diwali parties where we all dressed up, wore some Indian clothes and got together. And that was great. It was a great way of coming back, but yet sort of going back to our home bubbles. I think that's where people feel comfortable. And to Chris's point, and I'm a little biased there, I think the Fed has done a fantastic job. So the big PPP spend that we did sort of made sure that the GDP recovered very quickly. And you've not seen that in any of the past depressions or sort of, where it has recovered this quickly. And we sort of saw that. And then obviously now we have inflation to deal with, and the Fed is reacting, and companies also need to react. So I think all of us need to sort of be cognizant of the fact that 6-7% inflation is going to be there, prices are going to rise. So we need to make sure we give enough raises to employees as a result, and also have conversations with our vendors and customers saying, hey, we are going to raise our prices, and we understand if you will be raising your prices as well, because that's the new reality we live in. So sort of, build that as part of our planning and have those conversations up front, because that's kind of where we're heading.
Into the innovation, because that's one of the key interests. So what are some of the within your space, and also outside of that kind of was interesting, or you thought you would never see? Like, I'm even though right now I spend a lot of time in Harrisburg, I'm from the Washington DC area, and in some, like 6 months into the pandemic, a company came out there with this physical bubble that is connected to the tables in the restaurants. So when you are there, you switch it on, and it kind of creates this. And they had these pictures of that out there, and it's like, so all these people are sitting on these tables with their own little bubbles, right? It was like a weird things that you see, and so you're seeing a lot of these things, and in a technology company related, and when you look at it from looking at your customers or the how you collaborate, what are some of the innovations that you have seen that you thought was really cool, and if anything that you thought was like, that was weird, I hope it didn't stay long, or
Interesting. Like when I look at what I do now, I mind you, I've been building a new business for Elastic for the last 2 years since I've been here, and it's something that we don't have to market yet. So my time involved with startups and being able to evaluate new technology has been limited based off of building a new business within an existing company. But in some of the conversations that I've been able to have, and some of the objectives that we have for the business, isn't necessarily that it's any kind of revolutionary technology. It's about even doing things that currently exist better. And so I've actually been working with a startup who has created a platform, a web app that is pulling recipe data from thousands of different resources online. So instead of having to search individual websites and look for a given recipe, you can input what you would like to cook for dinner. It'll pull in recipes from all of these different areas, and it has a very clean user interface that allows for you to identify what ingredients you need, along with step-by-step instructions on how those will be used without having to scroll or lose your place of where you are, which doesn't seem like much, but so it's something that we've been utilizing for a long time, recipes online. but it's doing so in a far more efficient way and giving you access to far more data. But I look at that and understand, okay, this is an incredible, valuable piece of or a very valuable tool that can be used by the common everyday person. But how do we actually create a business value around it? And so what we would like to do is explore opportunities with major grocery chains that we have access to where we can actually plug their data into the same engine and identify. So when I find a recipe online or through this platform, and it gives me the ingredient list, and I already know that the Kroger's down the street has all of these ingredients, in stock, that I can click to order now. It'll be ready for delivery, or to deliver at my house in the next 24 hours, or available for pickup in the next 2 hours. And so how do we take this neat idea around this web platform, then the service that it provides, but create that business opportunity with a large grocery chain to actually make it a tangible use case and a really creating a much stronger user experience overall, while also creating an opportunity for a grocery chain to solve the problem of how do they enter into this innovative space as a traditional business to reach more customers and create a better experience for their customers.
Chris, we should certainly talk after this, or follow up, because we run an incubator and we have people who come here for startups, and so would love to figure out how to get some of them in front of you guys, right?
Yeah.
So Sanjay, talking about innovations, right? What are some of the things? The same question, that you found really interesting within your space and even outside that you have started, because before this conversation itself, we were talking about how we are all now digital and all the time on Zoom and things like that, which kind of initially was challenging, but people are getting used to that situation. But what are some of the innovations that you have seen in the space, and what are the things that you are excited about? And if, like I said, if there is one or two things that you thought that's weird, I hope it doesn't stay long or goes away.
Right. So we as an organization are constantly innovating, constantly filing patents, coming up with new ideas. In fact, one of the things to what Chris sort of does as an organization, Elasticsearch and document intelligence. So what we've done, one quick innovation that comes to mind, and then I'll talk a couple more, is we not only look at the lexical part of the document. So this was a new way for us to analyze a bunch of text, unstructured text that exists out there. So typically companies, do what are the keywords, what is outlined in the document, and sort of whether it's a legal document and what type of a legal document. But we are also now looking at the structure of the document. So using computer vision in conjunction with the lexical analysis to do and analyze the document in a platform that we've created called Document Intelligence. And that combination has sort of resulted in very high efficiency, where we were able to analyze a document effectively with good, just for lexical means 65-70%. Now we're at 90%. So Chris, shout out to anybody using Elasticsearch, just to come talk to us about that and how you can use computer vision in conjunction with the words of a document to take it to the next level. So we are improving the status quo significantly and applying that. We've also used radiology vision from a radiology perspective to find the appendix and do problems like that. We worked with football teams in helping them predict next plays, or being able to tell signs for offensive linemen, or the quarterbacks and running backs, so on and so forth. So these kind of innovations, I'm very excited about, and we encourage that a lot within our organization. The product managers, the data scientists work hand in hand to improve their products better. So one of the other tools that I've talked about here is question answering systems, where you have, and that's where the search comes in, another thing comes in. You've parsed all this information. Now show me the right answer that I'm looking for, and we've been building new and innovative ways to do that as well. So I think that's the future.
outside of your company or industry, have you seen something like, something complete, like when you talk about AR and, augmented reality and all these things, is there something that you're like, wow, that's
It's actually one us, all of us, and it's going to hit us even more in Pittsburgh than other places, is self-driving cars. So I think that's a pretty cool. And there are various ways, Aurora and other companies use multimodal ways of doing it, where they look at LiDAR and computer vision, put all of it together, use graph neural networks and other techniques to really simulate traffic and being able to make decisions in real time. Other companies are just using computer vision to do that. That excites us a lot. We are also now working with companies, back to my company again, on molecule AI. And what I mean by that is we are helping early stage companies seeing, versus having to, for new drug discovery, to you take a compound or a molecule and versus sort of, doing in vitro testing, synthesizing the compound, testing it in Petri dish, looking at toxicity, looking at if it's going to bind well with the receptors. Now we're able to do that in silico on the computer. So simulate all that stuff before you synthesize the compound. So it really speeds up the drug discovery process. So I'm very excited about that. There's a lot of, applications of AI that are going to change the way we all live and operate. So
really interesting, because we are almost like 10 minutes away from wrapping up. So I have two really important questions that I have to get to. So Chris, I'll start with you. So our students population comes from, not from, we're not an Ivy League school, so there's a different, and Harrisburg is not, a main city like a Boston or things like that. So how does your company recruit? And, is there internship opportunities? How does somebody here who's graduating get in front of a company like yours? What does that process look like? And especially now with this whole, hybrid remote thing, there's no, like, you can't just come in for, there's no open interview calls, or, you can't show up. There's no job fairs, it's all virtual. So what would some of the tips you would say, and, from your company's perspective, how do they hire? How does a student get in front, get noticed? And, kind of putting your journey also, right? I mean, from your, when you look back at your journey, how you got there, what would some of the advice that you would give the students?
So it's a really interesting question, because my experience is probably unique in the sense that I had actually, a colleague of mine at IBM had taken a global director role at Elastic, and part of him taking on that role was understanding how he wanted to create specific new businesses within the organization that he would be leading. And because we'd had so much familiarity in working together, I had actually helped him create the business model for what he was presenting in terms of the business that he would build in his interview process. And so once he was hired for the position, he says, okay, well, I presented this business. There are these expectations around what I'm doing, so I need you to come help me build it. And so I kind of had that unique avenue. We traditionally hire through recruiters. And so our job postings, you can typically find them on LinkedIn, as we are hiring if you follow the company. And so in terms of internships, yeah, I know that we have an internship program. I'm not exactly sure how it operates. Again, I've kind of been working in a silo in my 2 years at Elastic building a business. And so I have not hired a single person since I've been here until my business goes to market. So I don't have clear instruction on that. But I will say that in terms of my experience, as I've transitioned to different opportunities throughout my career, I've taken every opportunity to build meaningful relationships, and everywhere that I've worked, that I've focused on relationships and understanding that prioritizing the needs of the company and of others has always led to opportunities in some capacity, regardless of what industry I've been in. And so,
one thing I'd ask is if you, after this conversation, if you can find information or there's anything information that it worth sharing, please, share it with us through an email or something, Jamal, and, we'll share it with our students, our, student recruiting groups. If there are things like, internship programs or things like that, there are links to those, please share it with us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Sanjay, that same question, right? It's
Sure.
the
And I know
different
we're
kind of
running
students
short on
that.
time. Yep, but make it quick. So we hire interns all the time. So if you are interested, send your resume to hr@cognistics.com. We go through a rigorous recruit process. So there is an online test, and we do interview with the teams. So, but we are open to sort of anybody applying. We're looking for go-getters, people who want to make it happen, and also sort of just general advice to all the students out there and people listening. Reach out to your target companies, reach out, sort of make a list of ideal companies you want to work for, but don't be shy if they are not coming to Harrisburg University or other schools. You reach out to them, present yourself, and sort of these days it's easy to find leaders with LinkedIn and the other tools you have that are within those organizations. And to Chris's point, and Jay, like you were saying, network, build the relationships, use those networks, people who have confidence in you, you worked for in the past, sort of, your professors, use those networks to sort of, get into the door, and then sort of sky is the limit from there.
Question on that, Sanjay. So what are, like, you mentioned about the AI as kind of the larger space where your company sits, but what are, for somebody who's not experienced, just out of college, what would you say should be the technologies or skill set that should be, watching out for, and what are the skill set that you guys look for from purely from a technology perspective, and what are some of the soft skills that you look for?
Absolutely. I think our ability, everybody in our company sort of of course, as a person, you have to know yourself first. So sort of my advice to anybody is to do your self-assessment. So I am very proud. I'm a computer scientist. I'm a nerd at heart, and obviously I got the business skills and the presentation skills over time. You look at Chris and he's a biz dev guy, so you don't even need to go far beyond that, and he does that well. He'll be able to build that. So know your strengths, know yourself well. Then sort of, and of course, companies will have data scientists who are really good in that field, software engineers we look at who are really good at software engineering aspects, product managers, if you're interested in new products, what features they should have, working with the data scientists, working with the software engineers, understanding the markets, go-to-market strategy, if that's your interest, products are your interest, that's what I would say. Marketing is another area, sort of, and then business development, sort of, taking that go-to-market strategy, enhancing it, lead generation. So know your strengths, know what you want to do, and use that as passion to sort of, and it's okay to sort of, pivot and change a little bit, but sort of, work towards a big career there. Sort of, I think that's the advice I would give to students out there.
And so the same, like I told Chris, if there is, because we have had, other CEOs who after this conversation, they connected us to their HR or, to here's where the links are if there are open postings and things like that. So if there's any other information, we please, share with us. So Chris, so we like 5 minutes. So I want to wrap up with one last question. A lot of the people listening in are either startups, outside of the students, either startup founders or, executives of different companies. And one of the things, for this particular topic, the technology, as I mentioned at the beginning, is coming at you like so much speed. Like, every day there's a new acronym, new technology, new word, NFTs, blockchain, it's like, and then, there are people who are saying, well, youngsters who are making money out of NFTs and all of these things. So when technology is moving at this pace, what's an advice you would give to a leader that, how do you manage it? Does all of this matter? Or, how do you, like, for example, from a business dev perspective, right, where you sit, like you said, the technologies, so many of them are coming. How much do you need to know to do your job what's that one advice you would give, and anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I think that, in evaluating those opportunities, I think more so than the technology, it's about identifying a problem that you're passionate about solving and then understanding how technology can solve that problem. And so I think instead of leading with technology, I would always lead with the problem. So when I work with companies and as we make investment decisions, we have to decide, what problems does this solve? And does it scale? I mean, those are really the two major questions that we ask. And so I think that scaling is more so a question around the infrastructure of the company, what opportunities exist, what market opportunities are out there. But is it a problem that it also aligns with our core missions and our core beliefs? And so
it's a great advice to wrap up with, looking at what's the problem you're trying to solve and the ability to scale up, right? So Sanjay, the same, from your perspective, I would also add the leadership question, right?
Yep.
There are a lot of leaders who are like freaking out, and at least I still talk to so many people who are like, every day there's like 3 new acronyms or words. Am I supposed to know all about this? Am I missing an opportunity if I don't understand about this? So what's that?
So I would say you should never panic. Change is the only constant. Sort of, things will continue to happen. Things will continue adapt. Have a good base knowledge of whatever you do, and see these new technologies at the core level. What impact will they have, and where are they going to apply? Right. That's important. Then you should also be able to differentiate between mega shifts or micro trends. So what I mean by that is mega shifts is sort of, if you look at the 90s, and history is a great teacher. Email was a mega shift. The internet was a mega shift. Online commerce was a mega shift. Electronic e-vehicles was a mega shift. So understand these mega shifts. And then obviously, you have the metaverse. I don't know if that's going to be a micro trend or a mega shift, but time will tell. Sort of crypto, if the regulators and if they play well, sort of that could be a mega shift. It's a huge things happening there, but understand that. And I think another thing sort of for people to think about, and this again goes back to the ROI, and you should all be open to learning. Sort of never be fearful of anything. It's just technology. Cell phones was a mega shift, sort of the way sort of smartphones, I would say another one. But think of technology also mostly between painkillers and vitamins. And what I mean by that is things that will solve your pain points or deliver ROI will always be adapted and well. If it's only a vitamin where it's going to be, making you a little bit better, the adoption is going to be a little bit less from that perspective. So use these sort of core principles to think about mega trends, new technologies, and run with it.
Well, so two great advice, and the mega trends. That's a really important one, I think, for a lot of the business leaders to understand and differentiate, so that you're not chasing the next shiny thing and getting lost in this. So thanks again, Sanjay. Thanks to Chris, for joining our session. This is what I'm hoping is that some of these panels and some of these discussions raise so many follow-up questions that I hope to have both of you maybe come back a few months later to talk about outside the pandemic where we are, right? What has shifted. So love to have both of you back. But thanks again for joining our session.
Yep.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Chris, and
Thanks, Jay.
thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Jay.